My name is Gord Martin. I live in Waterloo, and I have been with Vision Ministries Canada for a long time. In fact, I was checking my files this week, and it was in 2000, the year 2000, that I have files of the beginnings of Orillia Community Church. So even though I haven't been here very often in the meantime, I have long memories of this congregation. Vision Ministries Canada does four things. The first and primary thing is planting new churches. So we've been involved with the planting of new churches or new initiatives more than 150 times since 1992 when we started. That's in Canada. You know, sometimes we think, oh, wonderful things are happening other places. Why not in Canada? But there are also wonderful things happening here. So in the last 24 years especially, we've been involved with a lot of immigrant churches. So we're now working with about 45 immigrant churches across Canada. So last Sunday, I preached to a Chinese church in Waterloo in the morning, to a Nigerian group in Mississauga in the evening, and next Sunday I will be speaking to a Persian group in Toronto. And so that's the flavor of our ministry these days, church planting. The second thing we do is to help existing churches to function better. And that's a very large part of our ministry. So we're often involved with churches who are in transition, who are making changes, or who want to make changes, helping them find a way forward. And we are involved in finding the next generation of leaders. That's a big concern to us, is to find the next generation of leaders, the people who are in their 20s and in their 30s, to help them find a way into leadership positions, because that's something of great importance. And fourthly, we are drawing these churches together into a collaborative network to support these initiatives of church planting and young leaders. So we're now working with about 175 churches across Canada from coast to coast. So that all has happened since 1992. To the angel of Orillia Community Church, did you know that you have an angel? I'd like you to think about that this morning. This is from Revelation chapter 1. The book of Revelation was written by the Apostle John. He was in exile. He was considered a troublemaker by the politicians of the day. They said, we need to get rid of this man. And they put him on this island of Patmos. And he writes a letter to the churches in what is now Turkey. But in those days, it was called Asia Minor. And he's writing a letter to these churches that were facing trials and persecution. Would you read this with me? I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. Now, we're going to have to read a little louder, okay? Can you all join in loud with me on this? On the Lord's day, I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, write on a scroll what you see and send it to the seven churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, and Philadelphia and Laodicea. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe that reached down to his feet, and a golden sash around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like a blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. And behold, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore what you have seen, what is now and what will take place later. The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and in the 7 golden lampstands is this: the 7 stars in his hand are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." This letter, or these letters, were written to 7 actual churches in Asia or Turkey. And they'd been started about 40 years before this writing took place. But who are these angels? Or, you know, that the word angel literally means messenger. Who are they? Are they real spirit beings? Is there an angel for every church, to the angel of the 7 churches? Are they guardian angels? Because in Matthew, Jesus was speaking to a crowd, and he said that children, they have angels who always behold the face of their Father. That's where the idea of guardian angels come from. So some of our kids have pretty busy angels. Or do we all have an angel? You know, the Bible speaks about spirit beings, angels and spirit beings around the whole world that we see. These are invisible creatures and spirit beings all around the world. There was a prayer meeting once upon a time, and Peter was in prison. And his brothers and sisters were gathering together to pray earnestly for Peter, who was in prison and in danger of being murdered. But an angel opened the gates of the prison. And Peter, in a daze, comes out and he says, "Where am I going to go?" And he says, "Well, of course, to the prayer meeting." He knew where the prayer meeting would be taking place, and he goes there and he knocks on the door. And this girl comes to the door and she doesn't know what to make of it. Who is he? She goes back and tells the group that, actually, how do you interrupt a group of people that's praying? She goes back and says, "Peter's at the door." They said, "This is impossible. He's in prison." She comes back and he still keeps on knocking because there's nothing happening. And she comes back and tells them again, "It's Peter. He's at the door." They said, "It can't be. Maybe it's his angel." Really? The Bible talks about this in bits and pieces all the way out throughout it, about these angels that appear from time to time. And in Hebrews it says that the angels are sent as ministering spirits to the people of God. There's more going on around us than we might think. Is it church leaders? Human leaders are sometimes called messengers, exactly the same word. And there's several occasions in the Old Testament where human leaders are called messengers, the same word for angels. It's hard to tell for sure in this passage whether it's talking about angels or human leaders. There's some struggles either way to know exactly how this is intended. But the letters are clear. Letters are written to the 7 churches, and we're doing an assessment here at Orillia Community Church, and I want you to understand that this is not the first time that the angel of each of these churches are being written to, and they are being called to account. And they're being called to account by the risen Christ. The first line of the book of Revelation says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, or the revealing of Jesus Christ. And then revealed is this person with his face like white and his eyes gleaming, and his sun like the radiance, his face like the radiance of the sun. That's the one who is interested in these churches. You're not just any old people here. Here at Orillia Community Church, this one of whom we read this morning is interested in what's going on here. I want you to realize this morning that when you come here, you're not just showing up and seeing who's at church today and what's happening. We're going to sing, we'll worship. I want you to understand that this risen Christ is interested in what is going on here. It's important for us to be fully aware and fully alive to that reality. To the church at Ephesus, he said, well, it's an impressive church. The people at Ephesus were hardworking people who endured and hated evil. But the two greatest commandments are to love God and to love people. And Ephesus was missing both. Smyrna, the persecuted church, they were experiencing afflictions and poverty, but the risen Christ calls them rich. I'm telling you that if you get to go on a mission trip to Uganda, you will learn something. Those people, those believers know some things that we don't. And we have some things that they don't have. But I would urge you to consider being a part of that. Pergamum, the tolerant church. I'm calling it Tolerant One Church because there's a second one. They lived in a dangerous place, had stood firmly in the past, but now they're becoming dangerously tolerant. It's true they refused to deny Christ, but they glossed over idolatry and sexual immorality in combination with Christ. The two can go together, they said. Go along to get along. Don't make a fuss. We're living at a time, I would say, this can easily be the Canadian church. If there's sexual immorality here, would the church leaders say anything about it?
Yes.
Some of you would say, well, it's none of their business. Thyatira, tolerant church number 2. They were increasing in love, faith, and good works. That's a good thing. But in their kindness, they were tolerating a false Jezebel-like prophetess who combined idolatry, sexual sin, and pagan traditions with Christianity. In Canada today, Christianity is one of the religions. That happened in the 1970s and 80s. When multiculturalism became the policy of our land. And swept in under multiculturalism was that neutrality about religions, that all religions are equal. We're having to learn how to live in that country. It's not like it used to be. We're having to learn how to be missionaries in the country that we grew up in. And some of us are quite slow learners about this. Sardis, a spiritually dead church. They had an appearance of life, but most of the people in the church had fallen asleep. Fallen asleep spiritually, except for a small remnant of believers. They are encouraged to revive any small bit of faith they had. And in Philadelphia, a spiritually alive church, they have only a little strength, but they have an open door. And the risen Christ says, nobody can shut it. Laodicea, the lukewarm, we're fine church. They were neither hot nor cold, disgusting. I will spit you out of my mouth, he says. They thought they were rich and in need of nothing, but they were wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Is it possible that we could be so deceived? quite shocking to see this. I want you to notice not just the mysterious things that we have difficulty understanding, but the clear things that Jesus is looking for. Your hard work, patient endurance, love, faith, your service, your patient endurance, those are things that he is looking at and seeing in these churches and is commending them. You don't tolerate evil men, their doctrines and their practices. You obeyed my command, didn't deny me, persevered in afflictions, poverty, and persecutions, even to death. These are things that the risen Christ speaks to the angel of each church, and he says, these are the things that matter. These are the things that I'm looking for. You are diligent. You turn from indifference. Wake up. These are things that he's speaking to these churches. Strengthen what you have. Go back to what you heard and believed at the beginning. Your first love. Hold on. Hold tightly to your little strength and hold on to what you have. These are things that he speaks to these 7 churches. And of course, these 7 churches are kind of like us all around the world today. These words are spoken to us as well. Buy gold and white garments. This is the most mysterious of all of the things that I'm putting on the screen this morning, because we're saying, well, what's that? How do you buy? But at least it means this, that we are to value the things that he values. Those are the things that actually matter. Now, today I'm actually here to speak to you about NCD, something called Natural Church Development. It's something that we've used quite a number of times over the years. It's been used all around the world. It's been used globally. 220 million individuals. Now, I know that you all received an email last night. It went out a bit early, and it was supposed to be sent today, but Brent was telling me that there was a glitch somewhere, and so you already got it last night. We're looking forward to you filling out those surveys. You will be added to 220 million people who have done this. So what we're looking at this morning are responses from that data, that information, drawn from 2.3 million people in some 75,000 churches in 86 different countries that have used this. So it's something that is well used. Jesus, in John 15, said, I want you to bear fruit. I want you to be not just satisfied that we've got fruit, it's also bearing fruit, much fruit, and bear lasting fruit, and bear increasingly fruitful. Fruitfulness is not an option when you read John 15. So I want you to be listening and hearing that the risen Christ is interested in what is going on here. We're also interested. We're saying, how will we bear fruit? Fruit that remains, and much fruit. That's what we're talking about. Are we bearing fruit? Are we bearing much fruit? Are we bearing lasting fruit? And so today we're looking at an assessment that looks at 8 quality characteristics. Now, all churches have leadership of some kind, spirituality. We all have worship services, evangelism of some kind. Ministries that we carry on, structures, small groups, relationships. These are the 8 things that NCD has identified as that when these things are strong and flourishing, the church is flourishing, is bearing fruit. But it's not just leadership, it's empowering leadership. The idea here is not that we have leaders who do it, it's leaders who empower others to lead also. There's a big difference here between having leaders who do the leadership. I do leadership, you watch. That's not what we're talking about. Empowering leadership says, actually you all can be involved in ministry as well. And we're talking to you. We're saying, how can we empower the people in this church to do all that God has wired them to do? That's called empowering leadership. How well are we doing that? That's what we're going to be looking at. Passionate spirituality, not just spirituality. Yes, we have a spiritual life. We know Christ. The Holy Spirit is in us. But here it's passionate spirituality. There's a big difference. We will be assessing to what degree is our spirituality passionate. Inspiring, we have worship services, but are they, do we have some people are excited about worship and others are just kind of making their lips move? What is happening among us? Is this worship inspiring? I was in Kenya a number of years ago, and I was at a church, a small church. It could have all been, no bigger than the platform. It was at the edge of a dump. All the people were poor. When they began, they didn't just have your problem this morning, Judy. The keyboard that morning did not work at all. So they said, you know what? Before we had keyboards, God gave us hands. And they began to clap. And they sang and they clapped, and I'll tell you, I thought to myself, if I was depressed coming here this morning, I am not able to leave the same. Because they had inspiring worship service. It was really something to see. Need-oriented evangelism. This is where that church, for example, they were on the edge of this massive, what am I calling it? It was a dump, but, I'm missing a word this morning. It was a lot of people were there. What do we call it? It was like a big ghetto. This is where they put that church in the place where the murders took place and where the rapes took place. And they put up a massive light pole to shine light all around. Maybe there were still murders and rapes, but they didn't happen in the light. This is a church that was doing need-oriented. There was a need here that they found a way to address. It was just so inspiring to me to see what they were doing in that place. Gift-based ministries. This is where people are serving according to the spiritual gifts that they have, because the Bible teaches us that we all have spiritual gifts. So the question is, do we know what they are, and are we using them? That's what we're looking at here. Effective structures. How is the church organized? How does the church make decisions? How does the church make decisions when they don't quite agree? Functional or effective structures are essential. If you have more than about 25 people, when you have about 20 or 25 people, it's kind of like a big family. But as the church grows beyond that, you have to find a way to add structures. Holistic small groups. Groups that not only do pray and Bible study, but they care for the people. They know the people. They are working together. Loving relationships. So what we're going to be doing in the next week is filling out these forms, and as you fill them out and as they are gathered, they will be collected together, and you will find out how did we do in each of these 8 areas of significance. Let's have that video.
Perhaps you're familiar with this scenario. Perhaps you've lived it. Maybe you're living it right now. We cannot question the commitment of these 2 people. However, we could question their ability to see what they've been given to make their next steps much easier. This caricature helps us to know what we mean by the natural in natural church development. In simple terms, we mean church development that is fruitful, unforced, sustainable, the kind that releases the potential of what God has provided, as opposed to trying to make things happen. When speaking of the unforced ways of the kingdom of God, Jesus encouraged us to see how the lilies of the field grow, and to notice that they don't toil or spin. He wasn't talking about taking a casual walk in the garden to get some fresh air after a hard day of ministry. The word he used for see is an intense form of investigation, focused on understanding the way the lilies grow. We can learn something of these ways by considering the humble pot plant. Here are 4 aspects about the life of a pot plant that we can directly influence: the size of the pot, the nutrients, the water, and the location. In this example, the nutrients are good, the location is well suited, the size of the pot is not too bad, however the water is a little limited. So what do we expect to see? Well, all by itself, as Jesus says in Mark 4:26, the plant begins to grow. We don't stand over the top of it, pulling it out of the ground. It just does what comes naturally. After some time, its growth slows and the leaves begin to wilt. What do? That's right, we water it. And without any other toiling or spinning, the wilted leaves stand back up and the plant continues to grow all by itself. A little later on, the plant's growth begins to slow again. What do now? Okay, so some people would say we should repot the plant into a larger pot. Really? Don't they remember what we did last time that was so successful? We watered it. And not only do we have the proof of history on our side, but consider the biblical support. In the beginning, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. Moses parted what to help the exiles escape? Water. And Jesus turned what into wine for his first miracle? That's right, water. And if all this proof was not enough, keep in mind that my grandfather donated the watering can that is mounted on the back wall of our church. Enough said. We are a watering church. Okay, so you get the picture. As crazy as it is, people follow this kind of procedure all the time. But here's the thing. Not only will more water not help the plant, it may even damage the roots and therefore harm it. Think about that. The very action that was once so clearly helpful for the growth of the plant will at another time harm it if something else is actually needed. Of course, what we must do is repot the plant, and with more room for its roots, the plant continues to grow all by itself, until perhaps the seasons change and the plant needs more light. We relocate it, and it continues to grow. This simple illustration shows the relationship of what God does and what we must do. We must remove barriers that release growth to happen all by itself. In the Apostle Paul's words, I planted the seed, Apollos watered, but God made it grow. These same dynamics apply for the living thing that is your church. Only, in this case, the areas that are your responsibility are the 8 quality characteristics of any healthy growing church, identified by NCD's global research. The inner terms on this diagram, the nouns, for example, relationships, leadership, structures, are the less interesting part here. They exist in every church in some form. The more interesting part, and what the NCD Church Survey tool measures, are the outer terms, the adjectives. So in this example, the question is not primarily something like how much ministry is going on, but whether that ministry is gift-based. That, along with all of the other adjectives, is the key. And just like the pot plant, whichever of these characteristics are least developed in your church is the one currently holding back all by itself growth to the greatest extent. With some very simple, consistent action steps in place, the quality of that least developed area can be improved, and so continues the ongoing process of embracing life in all its fullness in and around your church. So, which of the 8 quality characteristics come most naturally and least naturally to your church at the moment? Are you sure? If you would like to learn more about the 8 quality characteristics and the NCD Church Survey process, visit ncdchurchsurvey.org.
Thank you. I'm very interested in taking questions from you. I'm going to take time at the end to say, if you have questions, please speak up. Or if you don't want to speak up now during this public event, you can talk to me afterwards, because we're looking forward to pursuing this. This is the verse that he was quoting. And Jesus was saying, the kingdom of God is like a man who casts seed upon the ground and goes to bed at night and gets up by day. And the seed sprouts up and grows. How? He himself does not know. The earth produces crops all by itself. First the blade, then the head, and then the mature grain in the head. But when the crop permits, he immediately puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come. It's the idea of all by itself. And the whole idea of this survey is to say, what are we doing well? What are we doing? Which of these 8 are we doing naturally and well? We have no problem there. But which of them might be the lower score for us that we also have to pay attention to? The Bible indicates that we are gardeners, we're not mechanics. There are 6 phases to the annual cycle. So we already have a cycle. Most churches in Canada have the beginning of the year is really September, because that's when everything starts up. And so here we want to say, what is going on? We're taking this survey to say, we're taking our temperature. We're just putting it in our mouth and pulling it out and saying, this church has, looks like it's a little bit, has a temperature too much, too high. And so we want to perceive what is going on. We're going to test. We all already have an idea of what is going on. And some of us are pretty sure that we know exactly what is going on. But this is going to challenge that. It's going to validate our perceptions. We want to understand, what are the barriers that need to be removed that are actually holding us back? And we're going to have very candid conversations about that. What will we do to remove the barriers? If we're a watering church and we say, we know how to water a church, let's just keep doing that. Is that necessarily the best thing? It's very hard to give up something that we are good at and know how to do exactly, especially if we're now to come over here and to start doing something that we've never paid much attention to that before. So we're going to do that here. Execute a plan to remove the barriers and experience and watch to see what God does. The all by itself principle. Churches are usually coached through the first 2 or 3 cycles, and then take over working through the cycle on their own, or with a little coaching in 1 or 2 tricky areas. So I anticipate we will do that. So you've received the surveys already, or maybe you haven't seen them yet, but they're in your inbox. And there also are paper copies available. If you don't want to do it online, there are paper copies available, and you can talk with Brent about that. And I will meet with your NCD health team or your leadership team or your elders to review the results, because it's just helpful to have an outsider who doesn't have any problem, not attached to any of the present practices, to help coach through that area. So you'll get a feedback, something like this. So you'll find which are your higher scores, which are your lower scores. And the idea is that if you consider a bucket with wooden staves, and one of them is lower than the other, the bucket can only hold as much water as the lowest stave. Are you with me? So we want to bring that stave up so that the bucket is able to hold more water. So we will be assessing each of these and looking at this together, and we want to bring back the results to you and to all of you, because you're the ones that are providing the response and the information. So we want you to see the results of it. We want to identify the most critical need. We're going to have conversations around that. We want to name those barriers, what is holding us back. We want to create an action plan and work through the plan. This can seem, maybe when you look at it, you think, oh, what are they doing? You know, they're taking a survey, they're checking us out, they want to take our temperature. You might find this uncomfortable in some way. If you do, talk to me or talk to your leadership team members, because they're the ones that put us up to this. And because we will be talking, we're interested because the risen Christ that we read about in Revelation chapter 1 cares about what is going on here. It matters that we are fruitful, increasingly fruitful, and bearing fruit that remains. So we need to be serious about this. This is not a club. This is the body of Christ that we're talking about. And so we want to take seriously what is happening, what is holding us back, and what kind of plans we could make for the future. If you think that this sounds, oh, you have doubts about this, then would you really pray? Pray that God will help us. And if this sounds odd or weird or just so unlike OCC, we're doing this because the risen Christ cares. And we want to be fruitful and bear fruit that remains. We would like the risen Christ who writes to the angel at the church of Orillia. We would love to hear that there is a positive report. This is not just about us. The risen Christ is deeply interested. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you would like to ask or say? So talk to me afterwards. Talk to the leadership team members. We're looking to see the results quite quickly. And so I'm looking forward to connecting with the leadership team, going over the results with them, identifying what are the things that are holding us back. Really? That's our lowest score? We'll be looking at that. But all of you will be doing what? Pray. Yes. Actually, you're going to be doing what? Pray. Can you do louder? Pray. All right. Thank you very much. Let's have the worship team come back.